In June 2023, FIFA changed a rule. Almost nobody noticed. It wasn't front-page news. It looked like another small update. Just paperwork, just bureaucracy. But it wasn't. FIFA increased the number of players an ownership group could loan between its clubs. The limit went from 6 to 8, 2 extra players. That doesn't sound like much, but it changed everything. It gave wealthy owners even more control, more freedom, more power. Today, football clubs aren't just clubs anymore. For some investors, they're assets, pieces on a chessboard. And players, they're becoming investments instead of athletes. The game we love is changing. Most fans don't even realize it. Right now, some ownership groups control several clubs at once, not just 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 10. Some even own 14 clubs. They're spread across different countries, different leagues, different continents. But they all answer to the same owners. Players move between them constantly. Young talents are developed in cheaper leagues. Then they're sent to Europe. Finally, they're sold for huge profits. Some experts call this football laundering. Others call it smart business. Whatever you call it, it's changing football forever. When I started researching this topic, I expected to find a clever business strategy. Instead, I found something much bigger, something far more dangerous. Football clubs are slowly losing their identity. Communities are becoming corporations. History is becoming business. And most fans don't even see it happening. Welcome back to David's Soccer Stories. I'm David. Today, we're going beyond the pitch. We're uncovering one of the biggest changes in modern football. We'll explore how multi-club ownership works, why it threatens fair competition, and why even FIFA may not be able to stop it. To understand this system, we need to go back, not to where it began, but to where everything accelerated. August 2013 was the turning point when City Football Group bought 80% of New York City FC. The club hadn't even played a match yet, and most people saw it as a smart investment and a global business move. But it was much more than that. It was a blueprint that many others would soon copy. City Football Group didn't stop in New York. It expanded to Melbourne City, Yokohama F. Marinos, Montevideo City Torque, Lamel, Troyes, and one club after another. Today, City Football Group controls 13 clubs across 5 continents with different leagues, cultures, and fan bases, all managed under one ownership group with one long-term strategy. This is where things become worrying, because owning multiple clubs creates opportunities that single club owners simply don't have. Imagine discovering a talented 17-year-old in Uruguay, signing him for a small fee, developing him where wages and pressure are lower, then sending him to Belgium for a European experience, before eventually selling him to a Premier League club for millions. The main club may never even need him because the player has become a business project rather than a football project. According to reports, Manchester City earned more than $150 million from selling players who never played a competitive match for the first team, with many of them developed inside the City Football Group network. Financially, it's brilliant, but it changes the entire purpose of the system. Winning trophies is no longer the only objective. Making profits, building portfolios, and maximizing returns become just as important. Football slowly transforms from a sport into an investment business. And here's the shocking part. City Football Group isn't even the most aggressive example anymore. That title belongs to Red Bull, whose strategy goes even further. Red Bull doesn't simply own clubs, it reshapes them completely. Today, it controls clubs including RB Leipzig in Germany, Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, New York Red Bulls in the United States, and Red Bull Bragantino in Brazil, while previously owning others around the world. The biggest issue isn't ownership itself, it's identity. Most owners buy clubs, but Red Bull changes the name, the logo, the colors, and fills every part of the club with its own branding, pushing the club's history into the background. Even the football looks the same, with every Red Bull club following a shared philosophy built around high pressing, quick transitions, fast attacks, and young players. Different countries, different leagues, but one football identity that feels almost like a factory. Many football fans, especially in Germany, strongly oppose this idea because they believe clubs should belong to their communities rather than corporations. That's why Germany introduced the famous 50+1 rule, requiring club members to control the majority of voting rights and protecting clubs from complete corporate ownership, at least in theory. When RB Leipzig entered the Bundesliga in 2016, the reaction was explosive, with around 50,000 supporters from other clubs protesting because they believed German football itself was under attack. The anger wasn't about Leipzig winning, it was about how the club had been built. Red Bull found a loophole by technically operating as a membership club while severely limiting who could become a member. Most members had connections to Red Bull, ordinary supporters were effectively shut out, and membership fees were set far beyond what most fans could afford. The rule technically survived, but many believed its spirit had been completely destroyed. To critics, this wasn't simply clever business. It was corporate control taking over football culture. And from a business perspective, the plan worked perfectly. Today, RB Leipzig is one of Germany's strongest clubs, regularly competing for Bundesliga titles and Champions League places. But its success raises an uncomfortable question. What truly makes a football club real? Is it the trophies, the money, and the players? Or is it the fans, the history, and the traditions passed down through generations? If a club mainly exists to promote a global brand, can it still be called a football club? Or has it become a giant advertisement that just happens to play football? That's when I realized something important. Multi-club ownership isn't only changing who owns football, it's changing what football actually is, and that's where the real danger begins. The biggest danger isn't just ownership, it's the transfer market, where the system becomes even more controversial. Take Chelsea as an example. In 2022, the club signed Brazilian midfielder André Santos for around $14 million, and many fans expected him to become part of the first team. Instead, he was almost immediately sent on loan to Strasbourg, a French club connected to Chelsea's ownership, spending very little time at Stamford Bridge. At first glance, it looked like a normal loan because clubs do this all the time, but this situation was different. Chelsea still owned the player, Strasbourg received a talented midfielder, Chelsea gained financial flexibility, and the player remained inside the same ownership network. Everyone seemed to benefit, except perhaps the spirit of fair competition. This is where financial fair play becomes far more complicated. FFP was introduced to stop clubs from spending beyond their means and to create a level playing field. But multi-club ownership creates entirely new loopholes. Owners can move players between their own clubs, decide where they develop, when they move, and sometimes even influence how much they appear to be worth. Imagine owning both Club A and Club B, with Club A selling a player to Club B for $20 million. Who decides whether that player is actually worth $20 million? There is no independent buyer negotiating the price because the same owner controls both clubs. In reality, you're paying yourself. On paper, Club A records a major sale while Club B acquires a valuable player, making both financial statements look healthier and making FFP easier to satisfy. But has any genuine value actually been created? Not necessarily. Often it's simply money moving around inside the same ownership network. Many experts describe this process as financial engineering, where numbers are reshaped, values increase on paper, and clubs appear financially stronger even if very little has changed on the pitch. Football begins to resemble an investment portfolio more than a competitive sport. So why doesn't FIFA stop it? That's the obvious question. The answer is far more complicated than it seems. FIFA has introduced regulations stating that if two clubs under the same ownership qualify for the same UEFA competition, they must prove they operate independently. On paper, that sounds reasonable, but enforcing the rule is much more difficult. When RB Salzburg and RB Leipzig both qualified for the Champions League, UEFA asked Red Bull to demonstrate that the clubs were independently managed. Red Bull provided its assurances, UEFA accepted them, and officially everything was considered compliant. Critics, however, remained unconvinced. The clubs still shared similar scouting systems, training methods, football philosophies, long-term planning, and strategic ideas. Officially, they were separate, but in practice, they remained closely connected. This highlights FIFA's greatest challenge. How do you effectively regulate ownership groups backed by billions of dollars? These organizations are no longer just football clubs. They are global corporations supported by private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, and major international investors with enormous legal resources. If FIFA introduced strict restrictions, it could face years of expensive legal battles that few governing bodies are willing to fight. That's why many people believe football's regulators are gradually losing control, not because they fail to recognize the problem, but because the organizations creating it have become too powerful to confront. The most worrying part is that this trend isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. During 2023 alone, several new multi-club networks were established, more private investment firms entered football, Chelsea's ownership expanded into Strasbourg, and other major investors began exploring similar networks of their own. The message couldn't have been clearer. Multi-club ownership is no longer an exception. It's rapidly becoming the new normal. Now ask yourself a few important questions. What happens if every major football club eventually belongs to a larger ownership network? What happens when transfers become internal business transactions rather than genuine negotiations? What happens when a player's future is determined more by corporate strategy than by footballing ability? The future is no longer distant. It's already beginning to unfold. Football has always been about competition, where the best team wins, the smartest coach succeeds, and the hardest working players earn their place. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. But when one company controls multiple clubs, that idea begins to fade as business decisions become more important than sporting ones, and the boardroom becomes just as important as the pitch, perhaps even more. When I started researching this topic, I expected to find a clever business model that pushed a few ethical boundaries. Instead, I found something much bigger, a complete restructuring of modern football. Clubs are becoming corporate assets, players are becoming investments, supporters are becoming customers, and football itself is becoming a financial product. And that's what worries me the most. Not what has already happened, but what comes next. Because once clubs no longer need history, loyal supporters, or real identity, then what are they? If the only goal is profit and success is measured by return on investment, football begins to lose its soul. It stops being a sport built on passion and becomes a business built on numbers. Can we stop it? Honestly, I don't know. The money involved is enormous. The ownership structures are incredibly complex, and the organizations meant to regulate football may already be too late. But there is still one thing we can do. We can understand what's happening, talk about it, question it, and decide what kind of football we want to support. Because if fans stop caring, the game changes forever. So now I want to hear from you. Is multi-club ownership the future of football, or is it destroying the sport we love? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the biggest changes in football don't always happen on the field. Sometimes they happen behind the scenes.